The thing I remember most about any kind of showmanship or promotion was William Castle first, before anybody. I guess Disney, in a way. I knew there was such a thing as a Disney film. I would see him on television come out first and introduce the thing. So that was the first producer or director that had an image to me. But William Castle was much more fun, you know. I think the first thing I remember, and I don't, maybe I saw it in a magazine or I don't know, was him climbing out of a coffin at the premiere of Macabre. What a great thing. You know, and that influenced me forever. I mean, I'm practically climb out of coffins at my premieres. I mean, in a way, it was the first director that had fun with his own image. That became, and Hitchcock did too, and I knew that certainly. But William Castle was more fun and was more outlandish and trashier, you know. So when I was a kid, this was my God. I mean, I was obsessed by it. I was even obsessed as a child by things. You know, at church, I prayed to William Castle. I wanted to sit on William Castle's lap as Santa Claus. He was my mentor. And I just wanted to be taken into William Castle's world and live there, basically. William Castle influenced me basically by telling me when we started out, we had no money to promote our movies, that we had to turn ourselves into the marketing. Divine and I would come out, we were the gimmicks, you know. I would come out on stage dressed like a pimp, hippie, I don't know what, lunatic, and then say I'd like to introduce the most beautiful woman in the world. And Divine would come out, dressed as Divine, pushing a shopping cart, throwing dead fish in the audience. I would give lurid film theories like nudist camp movies are better than Fellini. You know, just go into these crackpot theories. And then Divine would kill a cop on stage. And we'd always find the cutest guy in each city and make him wear this cop uniform that we had stolen from a costume shop. And a short-haired wig because they were always hippies. And then he would come out and pretend to arrest Divine on stage and Divine would strangle him to death. That was our act. And it was influenced by William Castle. It was influenced by vaudeville, really, by trying to get people to see our films when we had no money. We had to invent this persona. And I still have that persona. You know, that's, I guess, why I have this mustache. That's why I go out on the road to promote my films, because I still want people to see them. And William Castle certainly set the example to me of how to do it and have a good time and not take yourself too seriously and never be pretentious about it. But nobody went to see William Castle's picture with their parents. I don't remember ever going. I mean, it was the movie your parents dropped you off to see. Well, I just remember William Castle always had a cigar, and he always had a director's chair with his name on it, something I always wanted as a child. And he was over the top. You know, I always liked Captain Hook and Peter Pan. I liked the Wicked Witch and Snow White and the Wizard of Oz. So I always liked the evil characters. And he was a ham bone, certainly. But he was a movie director. That's the thing I think that very much appealed to me. I certainly, when I was a kid, didn't say I want to be a movie director when I grew up. But I was a puppeteer, and I gave puppet shows all the time. And he influenced that part of my career very, very negatively, because I would try to put these gimmicks in the puppet shows, and they didn't work, and the parents would just look at me like I was insane. It really hurt my career when I would put wax paper over the stage and then hand out kids these glasses and said you could see the ghost. You couldn't see anything. It was just kids sitting there, with this wax paper over their face watching a puppet show. So he influenced me always. From the moment he came out, I followed him heavily, and I was just, but so did millions of kids. I mean, kids love William Castle. He was like the best camp counselor you could ever have. Crazy uncle, Gyro Gearloose, this mad inventor that came up with stuff. Well, to me, it was exciting. There he was, the man that thought this stuff up, the man that was going to wire my seats or give me special magical powers to see ghosts and have skeletons. He was a brand name. It was like Campbell's Soup. You saw his name, and I didn't care what, I'd go see it. I mean, I never thought, is there a good William Castle or a bad William Castle? It never entered my mind. I would just go see his movie, and I did up to the very end. I saw Rosemary's Baby. You know, if he was involved, I would see it. He certainly never made it to Baltimore that I know about, or I would have been there. You know, I would have forced my parents to take me to see William Castle. He might have, I mean, I might have read about it somewhere, because I certainly was following him then. And he didn't come to the Towson Theater, no. He had like a gray, like crew cut kind of short 50s hairdo, and he just was always laughing. And he was dressed always in theatrical wardrobe, usually. And also in getting out of a limo or a hearse or in a horror surrounding, or as a movie director. You'd see him always like in a movie chair. That's, I remember his little logo on the posters was, I think, Castle turning around with the director's chair. So I just wanted to be him. I don't know. I don't know if that's hindsight or, you know, I don't remember as a child writing like, what do you want to be when you grow up? William Castle. I had to hide those kind of things. You know, you couldn't tell people that then. I could think it. Well, I mean, I didn't dress like him as a child. It was hard to dress like him, where I could dress like Captain Hook or even the Wicked Witch on a weak moment. But you couldn't, I never got dressed up as William Castle, like with a cigar, and it'd be hard to. I used to cut out exploitation movie ads and keep them in books and stuff, pretend I owned a theater. And I never told anybody, but I pretend I owned a theater where I would show horror movies and movies that the nuns told us we'd go to hell to see, and I would imagine the outrage in the community. That was how I played. Other kids played baseball. I pretended I owned a dirty movie theater. The only directors then that became sort of auteurs was later in the arty world, way more than the Hollywood world. Certainly Bergman and Warhol and the underground movies and everything. But as a child, I don't remember anything except Kroger Babb, this other director that the nuns always told us we'd go to hell if we see this movie Mom and Dad. And he had the first midnight movie ever in the 40s called She Shoulda Said No, which is the best title I've ever heard still in my life. And he wouldn't even go to theaters, though. He would rent bingo halls, fire stations, Lions clubs, and go to towns that had no movie theaters and blanket it for a week earlier with advertising. And really have exploitation gimmicks like men only could see the movie in the day, women at night. He had fake nurses giving out sex education literature, which I think William Castle had fake nurses too. It's been a great trend. You just get one of the poor, underpaid theater employees. Come here, you have to put this on. What? I'm not wearing that. Yes, you are. They always used to make ushers do humiliating things. And even box office used to have like a little exploit tab. And it'd always be, make the ushers do this. They'd have to dress up like a monster and walk up and down there where kids kicked them. It was really hard to be an usher when you showed those movies because, like it or not, you were part of the ballyhoo. Kroger Babb showed the birth of a baby. That was his big thing. And it was the only way to show frontal female nudity. You just didn't look at the baby and looked at the vagina. But so he was adults only. He was definitely... it was exploitation, but not horror. It was in the fake grounds of sex education was what he was selling. But Mom and Dad played for 8 years in some cities. I mean, this was a great hit movie. William Castle was more Hollywood exploitation, certainly, and they would never call it that. That's a word that nobody used about themselves, I don't really think, in the 50s too much. Well, I think people wanted gimmicks because it was television had come out. And so basically they had to compete with that. So they had smell-o-vision, they had 3D, they had Percepto, they had Illusion. It was to compete with television, and people were panicked. So they had to come up with anything.
So there were these technical advancements that had come forward, like CinemaScope
and
3D.
Cinerama, certainly, which I even did a joke on polyester when they say, ladies and gentlemen, this is Odorama. And the screen gets an eighth of an inch bigger. I think William Castle probably thought up the gimmicks before the movie, which was, of course, everybody did that in the 50s. You thought the title, the ad campaign, and then you made a movie to fit it. I do that myself still.
Well, let's talk about the first Castle movie that you probably were aware of, which is Macabre. Can you tell me what the concept of this movie was, and then what...
No, I can't remember one thing about Macabre except the insurance policy. I don't think it's such a great movie, actually. The other ones are more fun. I just remember pictures of him at the premiere and the insurance policy. I was so obsessed by the insurance policy of dying by fright that it's blocked out the movie. I don't remember the movie. From House on Haunted Hill on, I do. Macabre, I couldn't pronounce the title either as a child. So there was another thing I liked. It sounded sophisticated to me. It was a French film. I think 3D is the first probably gimmick I ever saw, but I think Bwana Junction, I think I saw. But it was all right. But it was, it wasn't... I think it was an Indian movie or something. I wanted a little more horror, blood and guts. So I didn't see Macabre. I don't remember. I might have, because I remember the thing about the insurance policy, that you were insured of something so much if you die for fright. So I was more obsessed about watching the audience to see if somebody would die. And I went thinking someone would die. And that's the reason that they had these insurance policies, that obviously people were dying in the movie theater. The gimmick for Macabre was when you came in, when you bought a ticket, you had to fill out an insurance policy for I get how much money, in case you died of fright. So no wonder I don't remember the movie. I was just looking around to see if people were dying the whole time. And that's what appealed to me. I thought someone would die. I thought that when I paid to see that movie, that obviously they had done research here, and people die when you see this movie. So the little ghoul in me was really excited and thinking, well, we get to watch a movie, somebody die. It's really going to be a good afternoon up at the Towson Theater where I saw it.
Do you think William Castle thought that somebody might actually die?
No. I think the insurance company that did it was in on the, it was probably Lloyd's of London. They were famous for doing trashy, I think they still insure Jennifer Lopez's ass or something, you know? So basically that's an old tradition of insuring things, you know? Maybe I should insure my gag reflex. If you puke in my movie, I guarantee. That's a good marketing technique. You have to remember that. I think it was just all about marketing, and that's what I remember. Do I think William Castle was going to die? No, I think he probably had to pay the insurance company a certain amount for this coverage, and I'm sure there was a lot of fine print. You couldn't have a heart condition. I'm sure I would love to read the fine print when you signed that. I don't think too many kids read it. I don't know of anybody dying. I think of that movie Summer Wishes, Winter Dreams, where she dies watching a Bergman movie, I think. Dying watching a movie doesn't happen that much. Or if you do, it's hushed up. There's murders in movie theaters, you hear. I mean, Dillinger was arrested in a movie theater. I mean, there's certain classic stories. But anyone dying of fright in a movie theater, I have not heard. And I don't think in the William Castle Macabre anyone actually collected.
Okay, what was the gimmick in House on Haunted Hill called?
Emergo, it was called. And because the skeleton emerged out into the theater. And how it got on that cord, I don't know. Did the projectionists have to pull it? It wasn't even mechanical?
It was apparently in this little box.
Yeah.
You could see the box.
You would see the box for the whole time. Then it opened like the Batcave. But I watched that box the whole time, just waiting. But all I remember is it came out fairly slowly, so people had a lot of time to throw stuff at it. And I'm surprised people didn't hit it and knock it down. Then you have to keep your whole insurance policy for Macabre. Then you might die when you were like concussion from Emergo.
Well, was it a blow-up skeleton or was it a real skeleton?
No, it wasn't a real skeleton. I was a kid. To me, it looked like, of course, I thought they just robbed the graveyard and put it up there. To me, it was probably a plastic skeleton. But fairly substantial, not like the kind you get at Halloween that are made out of cardboard. It was real. And I can picture it to this day. And also, I think, didn't that movie Matinee have it in there? So maybe I'm getting confused with my memories, but I saw it many times. I didn't just see it once. I went back and saw it, and I went back and saw it. It was the first movie besides Cinderella and The Wizard of Oz that I saw repeatedly on my own, though. What was so great I remember about House on Haunted Hill, it wasn't a scary old mansion. It was like a Frank Lloyd Wright house or something, wasn't it? You know, in the beginning. I just remember Vincent Price, who I always loved immediately as a kid. I remember the vat of acid. And I remember the skeleton coming out. You know, those were the big moments. The skeleton coming out was that feeling of anarchy. I've never felt in my own movies except twice, when Divine ate dog shit and when they scratched number 2 on the Odorama card. I saw that kind of pandemonium in a theater. That only happened to me twice. It's a great, great moment. When you feel this explosion of cheap show business. I think they were marketing. I think really that the gimmicks were press agentry, really, and marketing and word of mouth, the same way eating shit was in Pink Flamingos, if you want to know the truth. You put something in a movie, that's critic-proof, really. People have to tell somebody about it. And every kid said, I saw this movie this week where a skeleton comes out on a wire over top of us in the theater. No one said, is the movie good? It was meaningless. It didn't matter if it was good. It was a shared experience of show business bedlam. And you know, at the end, maybe it wasn't even crowded. And I'm still sitting there watching this thing. You know, at the end of the run, I might have gone back one more time just to say goodbye to it. You know, it was that important to me. But I could never tell anybody about any of this stuff. I didn't bother because I knew that I learned early in my life that everything I was interested in, when I would try to talk about it to other children, they would just look at me like I was insane. So I just kept it to myself, or drew it, or made little cutouts of it, or thought about it, dwelled on it, I think would be the real world. I dwelled on it a lot.
But George Kuchar told me that when he went to see it, it just kind of came out on a clothesline and it made noise, and it would just kind of hang there, and all you could do is really just look.
Or didn't go. See, when I saw it, it went up to the projection booth. Otherwise, they would have pulled it, lynched it. These kids would have lynched it. I mean, they would have set it on fire. I mean, the violence that brought out in these kids of like the insane children behavior would have been like bonfires would have broken out in the theater. This incited such bratism. To me, The Tingler is the best movie ever made. To me, it's the ultimate high concept movie about this thing that lives in you and grows larger when you're frightened, and the only way to kill it is to scream. I have a Tingler. I mean, I've felt it in myself. And to me, I knew that these buzzers were there. But for some reason, I didn't see it first run. I didn't see that one downtown where supposedly in Baltimore. Maybe they wired all the seats. I saw it when it came to my neighborhood theater, the Towson. And it didn't come to the Senator, which was a much grander theater where House on Haunted Hill was playing. So maybe the Tingler, I don't know. But they didn't wire many seats, just a few, you know. And I would go early and look under each one. And I saw it. I mean, I remember, that's what I'm saying. Where is one of these things? Why does no one have the apparatus known as, what's it called? Percepto. Where is Percepto? How come not one person in the world has one? I want one to go under my desk chair that I work in every day, and every once in a while I can give myself the jolt of it. Did everyone just imagine this? Why isn't there one in the world? Why don't you have one? Why doesn't Terry Castle have one? No one has one. Everyone got thrown out. Someone is hoarding these things, and I want one.
Tell me about the Tingler, the monster. What is this thing? What does it look like?
The Tingler looked basically pitiful. I mean, it looked like you could have bought it at a joke shop. You see the wires when I was pulling it, but I like that better. I mean, I'm the type of person that thinks Crouching Tiger, they should do a remake with the strings showing, you know. I like bad special effects. You know, I hate digital special effects. They're so uninvolving. So you could basically see this wire pulling this thing. And what else I learned about the Tingler that I didn't know then, it was the first movie to ever talk about LSD. And it did, really before anyone had heard about LSD. And so I don't know the story behind that. But it's kind of amazing that it was the first LSD children's movie. I like to think that's part of its appeal. All I remember is if they're watching a silent movie, the film gets caught because the Tingler's in the projection booth and breaks and burns. You see it melt. And then it's a blank white screen and you see the Tingler going across it. And then it's in the theater and you see people's feet and they say, scream for your life. And everybody screams. And then the buzzers go off under your seats in the theater. Another great, great moment of bedlam. Although it was a little more embarrassing when I saw it because there was only a few people that had the buzzers. So, of course, I was quite theatrical reacting to it. And people were just looking at me like I was crazy. You know, I forget the plots. To be honest with you, the plots to me were never so important as the big scene and the gimmick. I don't remember. I remember she's in the, he owns a movie theater. One of the guys owns a movie theater, and his wife is the mute. But I don't remember. But the Tingler escapes from the thing and he has a little carrying case. I love that. It's like, so chic. Now, where's the Tingler carrying case? I want that too. Basically, just a carry. What's that? Nothing. This little case for the Tingler that's custom made too. It's really very, very glamorous. And he carries that around and it escapes and it gets loose in the movie theater. But I forget what's playing in the movie theater.
It's a silent movie.
A silent movie, of course.
And the thing starts crawling around in the theater.
And you see the floor, you see it on people's feet and stuff, and you see the strings pulling it. And then it gets in the projection booth and goes across the screen. So the film breaks and the screen's lit up and you just see the Tingler going across it. And it's a great, great moment. And that's when they say, ladies and gentlemen, the Tingler is loose in the theater. Scream for your life, and the buzzers go off under your seats. Is my memory. I may be wrong. But that is my, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And the buzzers themselves, it wasn't, everybody thought it was an electric shock. It wasn't really. It was more like a hand buzzer that went like under your seat. So it vibrated a little. It's my memory of it, you know. I certainly don't think it was a real shock. I don't think like you can get those things. Now there are tools. There's a little electric chair you can buy that when you touch it, you get a little shock. I don't think it was that. That would be good if it was. But I think it was more of like a hand buzzer kind of thing.
When you saw it for the first time, did you know what Percepto was?
Oh, yeah. I went and found the buzzer under the seat. I knew that they wired the seats, but I had heard that they didn't wire all of them. They were cheap. So I went, I was the first person in the theater and looked and just walked up until you found this thing. And that's what I'm saying. I saw it. So I knew I had a seat that had it under it. Well, some of them knew it too. They were kids. You know, the ones that were on the seats would like purposely really freak out, you know, overreact because other kids were watching them. They were the lucky ones that had the seats. So you really put on a very theatrical show, like you were being electrocuted or something. So I think that spread the myth that it was much more probably a powerful gimmick. Now today, you know, kids are so sophisticated. They're so used to brilliant special effects and everything that I don't know. They would just laugh at it. I don't know if they would go for it today, you know.
There's a lot of urban myths and urban legends that have arisen around this movie. Do you know of any of these stories that may or may not be apocryphal?
Well, supposedly they were testing the Percepto buzzers in some theater the night before it opened, and the nun story was playing, and they went off with the audience. That's about the only one I've heard, and I think that is in his book, maybe. Who knows? I mean, you got to really find the old timers to tell you the real stuff. The old people that were the projectionists and ran the theaters that put this stuff in, and and they made a lot of money from it. Um, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they saw plenty of urban myths about it too. I don't know. Would you ever hear that people died from it or got electrocuted? I don't know. I'm sure kids believed that at the time. The scene where the Tingler gets loose in the movie theater, certainly it was a huge influence on me and Cecil B. Demented when he takes over the drive-in and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Cecil B. Demented, I'm in the theater." The screen goes blank just like it did in the Tingler. I've always wanted to seize control of a movie theater. I think that comes from the Tingler.
Do you remember William Castle's introduction to the movie?
No, I think I remember the trailer of him explaining to you, but you mean he was on in the very beginning of each movie? Well, I certainly copied it in polyester. I have the doctor come on in the beginning and explain about how the Odorama card works and everything. Is that what he did?
Well, he basically says that certain people who are susceptible to the tingler will feel a slight tingling sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's sort of telling you in advance that if you scream, you'll be protected, basically. And then that's
But he's also protecting himself from what you just said of not having to wire every seat, because he says some of you who are more perceptible, and we're too cheap to wire all the seats, so you don't get it.
That's great.
13 Ghosts, the main thing I remember about it is Margaret Hamilton was in it, the Wicked Witch of the West, which really had me obsessed because she's still my favorite character in movies ever. And secondly, you got these glasses that when you came in, it was red and blue. Here's one, yes. And this is the Ghost Viewer, I believe they were called. And if you look through the red, you could see the ghosts, and if you look through the blue, you couldn't. Is that it? Right? You sort of couldn't. It didn't really work that great, but it didn't matter, And so that's the main thing about it. And it would go into this. The whole movie was in color, right? Yeah. No, the whole movie was in black and white. That's right. And then when the color sequences came on, you knew that it was time to look through here. And this is the one I tried to do with a puppet show, but this has nothing to do with wax paper. And it was, I mean, I was trying to figure out how they got it to work, and it never even worked that well anyway. It sort of did. I mean, you could sort of not see them when you put it on. But it was great to be given this, to hold this, and to feel this great relic of exploitation. And I hadn't had one for years, and I taught in prison for a long time. And one of my prisoners that was in my class said, I got a whole carton of them in my garage, and I'm going to write my mother, because he had 20 years or something, he wasn't getting out, and my mother's going to send you some, and she did. And he used to be a projectionist. So he was the criminal projectionist. Actually sent me my personal ghost viewer that is on the bookshelf in my bedroom.
What was the gimmick called?
Illusiono, right? Yeah. That seems kind of uninspired. I think Percepto, yeah, well, I guess they had to have an O at the end. Give me your money, O.
So, Illusiono, do you feel this was a successful gimmick?
Oh, it was for me as a child. It was very successful, yeah. I think it was sort of the end of the most successful ones. Box office-wise, I have no idea. I think it was a hit. I think it was also very successful. And I remember kids loving this, and you could take it home. So you couldn't take home the skeleton. You couldn't take home the buzzer under your seat. I mean, some might have pried it off, but you couldn't. But this you could. And certainly this inspired the Odorama card, which I used later. And I wonder, when Odorama came out for the insurance, we had to test that if you ate the card, it would be all right. What person would... Here's an Odorama card. Yummy. I think I'll eat it. I wonder if they did that with these. If you ate an Illusiono card, a ghost viewer, would you die? I bet then you could get away with it.
Well, it doesn't look too...
And this was also like from 3D glasses, certainly. Pushing it. He always went further than anybody else, where the critics thought he was ridiculous and kids thought he was great. Well, I think William Castle's movies weren't that expensive. I mean, I think they never had really big stars. They still had Vincent Price and people, but they didn't have the biggest stars. Or if they did, it was when the star had was coming down a little bit. I didn't think that way when I was 9 years old. I just wanted to go see William Castle's next movie. It was a brand name to me. But, I went to see Psycho, too, and that was a little bit later. But certainly he copied William Castle, too, in a way, by putting the gimmick. When I went to see Psycho, there was a clock in the window, and it was a big deal. No one admitted after the show started. And that was a big advertising gimmick then. And so all of them, in a way, had exploitation. They were just... William Castle was for exploitation for families, and Alfred Hitchcock was Oscar-winning exploitation. Hitchcock was already, his biggest gimmick was being a cameo in every one of his movies where you had to spot him. And he did that at the very beginning of the movie so you wouldn't look for him. But that was his greatest, I think, exploitation tip. Uh, the gimmick with Psycho that I remember is there was a clock and it had the showtime. So if you went there, if the show was at 2 o'clock and it said 2 or 1, no one would be able to go in. Which, in the old days, everybody walked in movies at all time. I hate that now. I think they should have that for every movie. The clock. They almost do now. I think some theaters never let you in after the feature started in New York. So I think that was actually really adapted by mainstream, movie complexes all over the world. Well, Hitchcock was the class act, certainly, and William Castle was his poor cousin. However, I liked William Castle better and still maybe do, which is such a sacrilege to say. Hitchcock did copy William Castle once with the gimmick in Psycho, you won't be admitted till the show begins. But I believe William Castle spent his whole life really being jealous of a little bit of Hitchcock. I think he wanted to be him. But he was the low-rent Hitchcock, and I mean that with great respect. He was more fun than Hitchcock. I mean, Hitchcock only had one suit. It was a good look, too. They both had great looks, and I'm really a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock, too. So, because they both were directors that made their persona famous. And before directors, kids didn't even know there was such a thing as a director. They knew movie stars and movies, but they didn't know about directors. I think William Castle and Hitchcock and Walt Disney, who was a producer really, not even a director, were the only names that kids knew behind the scenes really. And that was because of their style, because of their look, and how they exploited themselves in the campaigns for their movies, which was very, very new at the time. Well, I think William Castle wanted to be taken a little more seriously after Psycho, so he made Homicidal, which is a good movie, actually. It's probably the best one of all of them. It was the first one to really exploit the transsexual theme, which was also in Psycho. I mean, Norman Bates being dressed like his mother. Well, in this one, he cast somebody the kids really then didn't, they knew. It was the first time I think I ever heard of drag queens or anything about it. And you didn't know, really, if it was a man or a woman, and I think he purposely kept that knowledge kind of obscure. I think the woman, what was her name? Jean Arliss. I mean, I don't know anything about her. Is she alive and well? But did she have a career after that?
She played Lily Munster in the pilot of the Munsters.
Well, she went
Joan
on.
Marshall was her.
Yeah. So Jean Arliss was kind of a mythical figure to kids, but about transvesticism, which is really obscure. The first time any children ever thought of it. So I like him for that too. It's like the first person ever, except maybe Milton Berle was in drag a lot. Jack Benny maybe should have been. So I don't know. But I remember that movie. But certainly, when did that movie come out?
61.
I was in high school. So first year of high school. So basically, yeah, I think it was probably the first transsexual kind of thing that you thought about or talked about with friends.
So do you recall what the gimmick was in Homicidal?
No.
Well,
is Homicide the one that had the seat belts on the seat? No, that's
the fright break and the coward's corner.
Oh, that's right, the fright break. That was the most complicated one. The fright break was at one point they said if you're too afraid to see the end of the movie, you get your money back. Well, if you believe his book, the first time they tried it, everybody in the theater left to get their money back. So he then had different color tickets because they stayed through and watched the movie the second time. So he figured out how to change that with color-coded tickets. But then he wanted to make sure that you wouldn't do it. So you had to follow yellow footsteps up the aisle as you were bathed in a yellow light and had to walk to Coward's Corner, where yet another humiliated theater employee had to sit behind a yellow cardboard booth called Coward's Corner. Well, I always wondered, when I saw it in the theater, they did not have Coward's Corner. I don't think they even bothered. But how long would that take? If someone said, all right, I'm too afraid, they have to stop the movie, had to walk up the aisle, go to the back, stand in line at Coward's Corner, fill out forms. How long did that take? No one ever did it, I don't think. Was it even true? Did they ever really have it?
Yeah, apparently.
I never saw it, really. And no one would do it. You would be so humiliated by the rest of the children in the audience for being a coward. That's when I think he got so complicated that he lost his mind, basically. Where gimmetry became schizophrenia.
Do you recall if it's true that there was a recording that would say, watch this?
Yeah, supposedly, but I don't know if I've read this more than I saw because I don't remember even having it, really. Or maybe they only had the recording in my theater. If you were too frightened to watch this, go to Coward's Corner. I think Chicken or something like that. I vaguely remember. It's the kind of thing I've read about so much. I can't remember. I saw the movie at the Towson, same place I saw the Buzzers. It was where William Castle's movie showed in Baltimore, except for House on Haunted Hill, was at the Senator, the bigger one. Maybe they played there too, I don't remember. But I think by then, and the Coward's Corner wouldn't have been that hard. You just have to set up it looks like marketing booth today for Dinosaur, the movie. You know what I'm saying? They just set up this ridiculous looking thing, put some embarrassed, underpaid teenage clerk that had to just sit there, and stencil a couple of yellow footsteps in the aisle. That's not so hard. The yellow light you had to be bathed in. That might have been a little more complicated. Maybe that was for flagship theaters only. Mr. Sardonicus, the gimmick was, at the end, you got to choose the ending of the movie, right? What was that called? I forget.
Punishment poll.
The punishment poll. That's right. Where you got a card that had thumbs up and thumbs down. And so I never saw this movie then. I saw it later. So in my theater, I'm sure they didn't have this. But you got this thing, and no one ever put that he lived at the end. So I don't believe there is an ending ever that says he lived, and no one has ever found one. So have you? I don't think there is one. But however, of course, everybody holds up the thing for him to die. But I didn't see that as a child, I don't think. If I did, it's so hard to remember these myths. You know what I mean? If you've read about him, I've also written William Castle's introduction to his book. So I've written about him so much and know about it that I don't remember if I saw it. I sometimes like to believe I did. But I know I didn't see any other ending that no one else saw. I wasn't in the only theater that ever let him live.
I'm pretty sure that they never shot a second.
Well, first of all, it would be really hard to do because you'd have to have that ending. You'd have another projector. I mean, if you had two endings, you can't just suddenly splice it on. I mean, they're up there count 1, 2. I don't believe that. So there might have been theaters that would be really interesting, theaters that voted him to live, and they didn't have it. Then there'd really be Coward's Corner in reverse.
Well, he protected himself here too, because I don't know if you remember, but he's in the movie at that point.
Yeah, he's the one that said, yeah.
And he's counting.
And he's counting. That's like Romper Room, Yomper, Romper, Stomper, Boo. I see you, Billy. That's really good. That's really insane. He's talking to you in the theater. Yikes.
Okay, let's talk about Straight Jacket.
Well, then, Straight Jacket, he finally had the biggest gimmick of all, Joan Crawford. And all movie stars are gimmicks when you think about it. They are. They're just like a Percepto chair. They are. There's a way you sell your movie. And having her worked. It did work. And that was when all the female stars were making Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, whatever. What's the Matter with Helen? I love all those titles, especially when they actually say them. What's the matter with Helen? When they actually say it in the dialogue, it really makes me crazy. And I'm sure in that movie someone says, I saw what you did. I always like it when they say the title.
So Joan was coming off of her post-Baby Jane career?
I guess. Yeah, it was after she made those movies and until Bankhead made Die, Die, My Darling. I mean, it was a genre that should come back, really.
Do you recall any scenes with Joan in the movie?
Well, yes. When she cuts the head off with an axe in the beginning, I even used that in Serial Mom in the video shop. Yeah, so that was a great shot for me as a child because you could see the shadow of the head coming off. And she had that great dress on with that big axe. It's a very, very famous scene in my mind, yes. And I was so happy to include it in one of my own movies in tribute.
Okay, I saw what you did.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the thing I remember mostly because we used to do that. Call up, go over to girls' houses when they were babysitting and make crank phone calls all night until the operator would find out. Then she could cut your whole phone off. It would freak you out because you knew you were caught. So I was a participant in prank phone calls a lot. So that's why that movie spoke to me.
Then we have The Night Walker.
Didn't see that. I know what it is, but I didn't see that. By then, we're talking what year?
That was 64, but then we're getting into
I was on LSD.
Okay, different time. Well, I want to talk about that. I mean,
yeah.
We have...
Due to the Tingler. No, I'm just kidding.
You're inspired by...
No, I didn't know what LSD was when I saw the Tingler. Well, these movies, then I was older, too. I wasn't a child anymore, so I was more cynical. I took LSD by then. It makes a big difference in reacting to a buzzer under your seat, whether you've taken LSD or not, I'm telling you. So the times were changing, as Divine says in Hairspray. I was older and more cynical, but I still went to see his movies. 13 Frightened Girls, I just always loved that name still. I think the movie was just like a bad contest to find the cutest starlet in every country, but it's really a good title. I always on the street look for 13 Frightened Girls. I don't know, this is like Suddenly Last Summer. It's a great title. Well, Shanks I saw later, you know. No, really in the 60s was the time of the peak of my lunacy as a young man, you know. I was at political riots then. I wasn't watching Zots. Mid 60s, everything radically changed, you know. And then they were hokey to some, you know. I'm sure if they, the innocence was gone. I mean, that's what it was. I mean, a bunch of kids, if they wanted bedlam in show business then, they wanted to see somebody ripping guts out. They didn't want to see a skeleton coming across. It had to go further. It had to be more extreme. And people were more cynical. People thought they had seen everything. And they had almost, because so much lunacy happened in the 60s. That to get a theater full of people screaming and yelling, you had to go much further than William Castle. And he later, of course, came back with his classiest act, really, which Rosemary's Baby, which was Satanism, which was another thing to make people crazy. And of course, he had Roman Polanski, and you know, he had. But I think even William Castle wanted to be respectable at the end.
Do you know how Rosemary's Baby came about?
I don't. I mean, I never even liked the book. I'll be honest with you. Of all his movies, not my favorite.
But he couldn't resist though, because in Rosemary's Baby, he's in that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember?
No, I can't remember. What he plays an insane movie director or
He's
something.
waiting outside the. You see the back of his head.
Uh-huh.
He's waiting outside the phone booth when Mia Farrow's in there, calling for help, calling her doctor for help, and then she thinks it's the bad guy, and he turns around and it's William Castle.
It's William Castle. You see, that's his Hitchcock thing of trying to put, you know, himself in every movie in a sort of cameo part. But you know, that was his prestige item. That's the one where he got the last laugh on Hollywood, certainly because it was a giant hit and critically well reviewed, and he was suddenly a class act. He was always a class act to me, though. Well, I remember I wrote about him in Shock Value, and I was in Provincetown a lot, where Bruce Goldstein was, and at the movies there. And I think they had a festival. I don't know who did it first. I remember the New Art had one because I introduced the films, and I had Terry Castle, William Castle's daughter, on stage with me, and we did questions and answers. I know in Provincetown they did it, and they wired the seats, and they did everything. Later he did it at the Film Forum. And then colleges began to do it, and it became a revival thing. It always worked. Kids, I mean, as soon as people heard about these movies, they wanted to see them. People still wanted to see a skeleton flying over their heads. The last time I saw his movie with a real audience was probably the Tingler at the New Art when the seats were wired, and it was the Bedlam. Of course, they were all marijuana. It's the difference. Instead of being at a birthday party, it's the same Bedlam, though. Yes, I think William Castle's films date wonderfully. I think they play today. I used to show them at the New Art Theater and different cinemas where they'd wire the seats again. They'd have people running down the aisles, and kids went crazy for him. These weren't children. These were hipsters, right? Yes, I think he's a great auteur. One that will last and be respected, and an incredible influence on everybody from that generation and how films are marketed today even. Be hard to make the gimmicks work because they're going to open in 1,700 theaters the first weekend. Would the theater managers even put them up? I know when we had Odorama, I could never get them to pay the Odorama bill, believe me. It's the last thing they pay in their pile of bills. Do you think the Odorama bill? We're not giving you Odorama again then. Well, there was never. Do you think they would pay their Percepto bills? They wouldn't. Do you think they'd pay their Emergo bills? I promise you they wouldn't. Well, they still have showmanship. You know, sure, I mean, in Cannes, there's plenty of it. Troma films, they all dress like the monsters and walk around giving out flyers. Airplanes, they don't have as much of them. It used to have the title of the movie, coming next year, Superman 8, you know, fly by. Oh, I love that. Airplane advertising is so great. Yeah, there's always new ways to do it. It's just bigger now, you see, because of video and everything. It used to be a movie came out and could play for a year in movie theaters. And it was slow. You'd open in one theater first run, and then 3 months later it would come to the neighborhood theater. Now it's over in 2 weeks, and it's out on video. So it's a different kind of exploitation. It's much more organized. What junkets are exploitation. But they're phonier, and they're much more almost impossible to have any real news come from a junket. Where in the old days, when you had to go to each city and they took you around and you had to get out, and you really it was like a campaign for a politician. You met the fans, you went to the theaters at the premiere, and these were not invited famous people. These were the crazy people, the people that bought the tickets, the people that pay your salary. You know, it's different now. You're not in touch with that as much, and it's maybe not as much fun. But do kids today go alone to see movies that influence them, that they'll have this incredible nostalgia back? Sure. The only thing that's different about all the things you're talking about, the new 3D and IMAX and Disneyland and all, there's something too high class about them. There's something not involving to me. they're too good. They're not as cheesy. They're not something that only kids know about. You have to see those things with your parents. It's no fun when you have to go with your parents. My final word on William Castle is probably if I had to pick 10 people from any walks of life who influenced me to where I am today, he would definitely be one of them. And I look back on him with great, great fondness. And somebody that was a happy man, I think.
Beautiful. It's perfect.
Okay.
Perfect way to end it.
Mr. Moontown? Sure. Okay, very quiet, please.